All right, so it's been about a good month since Nolan's Odyssey movie had been released, and I took a long time to think about it, and I took a long time to essentially to assemble my thoughts from how I was feeling and to my overall reaction to the build-up, to its full release, to finally me watching the movie when it around the first 2 weeks when it first came out. And I honestly have to say that this movie was something special. It is truly an epic adaptation of a nearly 3,000-year-old story that has really survived pretty much every single century of our existence as a human species. If we discount, like, farther back than that, but you know what I mean. But besides that, this was also a movie that has become extraordinarily divisive. This is probably, like, I think the most, like, polarized discourse that I have seen on a film in, like, a very, very long time. I can't even recall if there was even a movie that was this divisive, stemming all from the casting to the choices of dialogue to even the choice of Nolan using a specific translation of the Odyssey.
That's why it's surprising to be in this unusual territory of having to talk about Christopher Nolan's name mired in controversy.
Recently, Zendaya was in a bookstore and she was doing a little candid photo. Look right there. What's that? What's that in the picture? Which adaptation of the Odyssey is she holding?
Lupita Nyong'o is the most beautiful woman in the world, and a 5-foot female transvestite is the strongest warrior ever to live.
Literally just made this film blow up in the amount of success that it so vehemently deserves, because all of that all of that just made it even more successful. Besides the reasons of being a big lover of Greek mythology, and also the reason of being somebody who has read the Odyssey, I was excited already, but all of the discourse just made me even more, like, compelled to watch it. So when I finally watched the movie and got back home right afterwards, literally in, like, pretty late at night, I would say, in my personal opinion, it's probably, like, one of my top 5 Nolan films. However, it still does not beat Oppenheimer and The Dark Knight Rises, as well as Interstellar. Obviously, that's number 1. We all agree about that. It's still really, really fucking good. I mean, the cinematography to the visual effects that are all just practical effects. Come on, you can't hate that. Obviously, it's not the best movie. Obviously, this is probably not one of Nolan's best work. There are a lot of things that are not so perfect, and that has to do with, a lot of the creative liberties that Christopher Nolan has gone through for his adaptation of the Odyssey. And one of those was obviously the use of modern English.
You're pining for a daddy you didn't even know, like some sniveling bastard.
And I'm just going to get that out of the way first, because for me personally, the use of modern English for the Odyssey movie for Nolan, to me personally, that's okay. I literally just got used to it in literally, like, the first few minutes of the movie. Of course, a lot of people would have liked a more theatrical English, like, a Shakespearean English, maybe, to say, or a more theater stage-friendly English, which is, of course, like, what a lot of people would use in, like, historical films in a lot of the cases. But then again, it's all right. I didn't have any problems with it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Now, like I said, this movie had been probably one of the most divisive things that has, like, divided the internet. And obviously that mostly stems from the casting, most specifically Elliot Page and Lupita Nyong'o. Now, when it was revealed that Lupita Nyong'o was going to be portraying Helen of Troy, well, you can guess the rest when it comes to, like, the internet. Most specifically, from these assholes.
We get Black Helen of Troy, who is originally from Sparta, and I would expect this from the rest of Hollywood, but not from Chris Nolan.
I mean, if you go back to, things like we've produced over here in the UK, we've had an Asian Sir Isaac Newton, we've had a Black Anne Boleyn. These are real historical characters, but we're now supposed to pretend that they're a completely different race, and it doesn't make sense.
At this point, this should have been Helen of Troy. You ready? In 3, 2, 1. At this point, this should have been Helen of Troy. That one is Helen of Congo.
Same thing goes for Elliot Page when there were rumors that were speculating that he was going to be playing Achilles, which was not the case, but they still went after him. And, they had comments like this.
And the greatest warrior ever to live is now this like tiny transvestite lady? Hold on, that doesn't make sense, right?
Obviously, if you're a sensible type of person like myself, you don't take those comments fucking seriously, and you just scooch them away and say, yeah, they're just a bunch of asshole pricks that really just hate everything by this point. What I also really love about like those comments is that they were saying like, oh, it's gonna fail because Hollywood jamming the fucking culture war. They care more about the culture war than we do. And guess what, guys? It didn't fail, by the way. And, it's fucking successful. I mean, like, guys, come on. Not only were the casting choices star-studded, but it's also fucking Christopher Nolan. Whatever fucking movie that man is going to make, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a successful one. Now, in the other part of, like, this whole Odyssey discourse that has just been happening online pretty much nonstop, like, it's literally been a month. And there have been other videos on YouTube that are like as recent as like 2 weeks, talking about like how so fucking divisive this movie is, and like all of like the issues that the film has, and the criticisms that people validly do, most especially the experts and the academics. But this is where I will fill in sort of like my own pile of like shit to like the discourse. Because if we were to compare Nolan's Odyssey adaptation to the text of the Odyssey, in comparison, Nolan's movie is far more grounded and is far more focused on a much broader message when it comes to essentially like, human history, or like man as a person, and also like the message of warfare and really people facing the consequences of their own actions and how they can be redeemed to become a much better person, which is practically like, the main elements of the Odyssey. And from that, Nolan has kept the core element pretty much alive in his film. How a man travels through and faces challenges and adversity against whatever fucking shit the universe has thrown against him, all so that he can be a much better person when he finally reaches the fucking finish line. And again, that's the main core and the main element of Odysseus' story. And to further explain sort of like this whole narrative of Nolan's Odyssey being much more grounded and much more human, and much more focused on like the human aspects and more on sort of like the grief and the sufferings of PTSD per se. On Odysseus, portrayed by Matt Damon, pretty good job, that is pretty much epitomized with Odysseus' monologue when he is dressed up in disguise as a beggar talking to Penelope.
What if the Odysseus you knew lost his way? What if one night in a strange city he saw things that made him think the home he knew couldn't possibly be there anymore?
It pretty much shows how guilt of someone's actions when they are going off to war, or an action that they have committed in warfare, just begins to eternally haunt them pretty much for like the entirety of like the movie, and just trying to come to terms with it and trying to live your life with that forever scar essentially on yourself. And I really do think that is like the broader message of the Odyssey movie by Nolan. And again, it's pretty fucking fantastic. It's a really great reinterpretation of the Odyssey story. It's one of those many elements that is existent in the original story. It's just that Nolan has decided to focus on that specific one so that it can, better translate into a movie adaptation. Because guess what, folks? Because if you're going to be adapting something to, a movie screen, there are going to be a lot of creative liberties that you have to make. That even goes for like his Oppenheimer movie. And I fucking love that movie. And this is where we finally get to pretty much like my personal feelings on sort of like the online discourse that has happened and also still currently happening, apparently. In my personal opinion, it's gotten to the point where it's gone far too long, and it's pretty much unnecessary at this point. Because when we are trying to like discuss on like how accurate it is to like the story, but I'm sorry, folks, even like the oldest translation that we all have of the Odyssey is not even the original Odyssey. Because this ancient Greek story survived pretty much purely through oral traditions and through oral like retellings of like theatrical plays to comedies to people just joking about it, and maybe even or someone's grandmother speaking it to about them. Like the oldest translation that we have of like the Odyssey, or like the oldest written record of the Odyssey that we know of, was written like 400 years after like the story itself took place. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a person who loves like historical films, and I want them to be as accurate as possible. But even I myself have to say like that's really impossible. Because if you want like a historical movie to be 100% accurate, or you want like a movie to be 100% accurate to like the source material, then at that point you might as well just watch a documentary. To me personally, what matters most is the movie faithful to the source material and authentic to it? Then the question of, is it accurate, and is it like 100% accurate to like the source material? Because that's again impossible if you're going to be adapting something into like the big screen for the movies. Like it's impossible. Even Oppenheimer, again, a movie that I fucking love, and also a movie that is like historically faithful to like the actual history, is even not accurate, guys. Like there are a lot of things inaccurate about the Oppenheimer film, but we fucking loved it, didn't we? I should also say, in terms of like how the story of the Odyssey has been passed down through oral traditions, I have to give Nolan props for literally, giving Travis Scott the role of the bard, retelling sort of like, the siege of Troy. I will say, when he was banging that staff on the table, I was whispering to myself, "Fiend." Every time he was banging the staff and saying like, a trick, fiend. I'm sorry, but I will say this, Travis, if you're going to be, doing a new intro for your song Fiend, bang the staff again on the stage and, recite your lines in the movie. I can tell you that's going to be, that will go hard. That will go hard. Anyways, that's off topic. Going back, the reason why I'm pointing this out, Travis Scott playing the bard in the movie, that epitomizes of just how this like story survived for so long, like nearly 3,000 years, like what, 3,000 years, or like nearly 3,000 years, 2,700 something, to be very specific if you guys want that. And him being like, a rapper, and him being cast out as a bard, it's a pretty good meta play there, Nolan. Like, props to you on that one. And it's with that fact of the Odyssey being, spread through oral traditions before it was rewritten over and over again, translated, retranslated over and over again. There really isn't like a very perfect translation of the Odyssey. Instead of like, the ancient Greek text of it, like that is like, as perfect as you can get. But with every single translation and every single retelling, reinterpretation, and adaptations, every single one of these, like despite its like imperfections, it contributes to the myth and legend itself of the Odyssey. Again, think about it. A nearly 3,000-year-old story is still surviving till this day. Like, I think that alone is impressive if you think about it. Like, if you really, really think about it, like, that in of it itself is fucking glorious. And obviously, besides all of, like, those translations and retellings, the other movies that I can, like, point out is, like, the 1997 Odyssey, which is also very, like, imperfect, but it's still quite good, quite campy. Also, the 1954 Ulysses, which is 1950s. I would say, like, to be specific, 1954. Yeah, that's fucking old. I haven't seen it personally in like a while. The last time that I seen it was like when the last time that I've seen that movie was like, what, 3 years ago? And that was when I was a little drunk. So I can't really fully recall. And even before Nolan's movie for the Odyssey came out, there was actually another movie adaptation of the Odyssey, and that was The Return, starring Ralph Fiennes as Odysseus, and that was like way back in 2024. And that movie was fucking good. I would say, like, if we compare like The Return to like Nolan's 2026 film of the Odyssey, I would say it's like it's even 50-50. I can't really choose either of them because I like both. Okay, I like both a lot. So if we were going to go back to all of these retellings and movies being a stern and rightful contribution to the myth and also to like the story's survival, what is Nolan's like piece for the pile? Well, like I said, since his movie is a lot more grounded and it's a lot more human, it's basically like the Odyssey if it was more human. Besides the monologue that Odysseus has made to Penelope when he was disguised as a beggar, the omissions of the Greek gods to be more sort of superficial or like more in the background and more represented in like, the weather, the time, and others besides Athena, who appears a lot, and besides, Circe and Calypso, that is what I can say is like, okay, that's a pretty okay change to make this film a lot more grounded and for Nolan's objective with the film to make it feel, more relatable and more tolerable for the modern audiences. And obviously for his much larger message to essentially span across a lot more easily for the audiences to absorb, which was kind of like Nolan's much larger like anti-war narrative that he pretty much like carried over from like his Oppenheimer film to his Odyssey film, which is represented wildly through Odysseus' journey and has been capped off with like his monologue to Penelope as he was disguised as a beggar. Which, if we were going to put it in like, theatrical terms, it is the dooming of humanity and civilization of our Bronze Age that is now collapsing. Obviously, I heavily paraphrase that monologue, but again, that fucking monologue was so fucking good. Like, good job, man. Now, this is where I get into like the sort of big elephant in the room, at least for me. And that is this comparison between the Odyssey movie and the epic, the musical.
I am going to say this after seeing various posts across multiple platforms about this. Y'all need to stop comparing Epic to the Odyssey movie. As an Epic OG who just went and saw the Odyssey, it was a phenomenal movie, and was, in my opinion, more accurate to the source material than Epic. This in no way is meaning to put down Epic, but it's starting to get infuriating seeing people say that Nolan copied Epic with the score or other storytelling aspects. Nolan is notoriously one of the most offline and antisocial directors out there, and he wrote the script based off of multiple transcriptions of the Odyssey, and I honestly noticed no similarities between the score and Epic.
Okay, I know there are mixed opinions in this community about Nolan's Odyssey, and I understand changes are shocking, but Epic the Musical is not the end-all be-all of the Odyssey. What I feel like many people fail to understand is that you can use the same story to express different messages. Homer's Odyssey is a warning against hubris, pride, and angering higher powers. Epic the Musical is about a man turning into a monster and making unspeakable choices to get back to those he loves. Nolan's Odyssey is the story of a war veteran who just wants to forget his trauma and not be haunted by war.
And I feel, and to me personally, like in regards to like this discourse surrounding the comparisons between, Nolan's Odyssey movie and Epic the Musical, and which is better, or like this good, or like this better, so then this other one bad, very bad. Don't go there. Consume this instead. Like at that point, guys, just stop with that. All right, like I get it where you guys are coming from, because of like how much changes Nolan made for like his movie to make it more tolerable for the audience, that it kind of really dumbs down the character of Odysseus, and really made a lot of like creative liberties to make it fit again to the big screen. And in regards to like Epic's the Musical, the reason why it remains the most faithful to it is because it's a musical. Like it benefits on being a musical. But then again, it even made a lot of creative liberties as well to have like the sort of the story of Odysseus be like sort of like an anime protagonist like journey. And to me personally, if we are going to be like comparing Nolan's movie and Jorge's Epic's the Musical, it's a really unfair comparison, because a musical and a movie are vastly different things, that the only time where you can compare a musical and a movie is when the movie is a musical adapting the musical like play that would be on like Broadway or something. Like it's really just an unfair comparison, and this is coming from somebody who loved both. And if you're wondering how I have gotten to like this conclusion, I will give you guys some context. Right after I watched the Odyssey film, it was literally the day after the. It was literally like the day out. What the hell am I saying? Basically, right after I watched the movie, I ended up discovering Epic's the Musical for like the very first time. And I binged through like that entire thing. And I fucking loved it. And here's the thing, I was already like reviving myself into like going through like the pipeline of just relearning and like studying again about Greek's like ancient history to like its contemporary modern history. And then it led me to like, this whole discourse and arguments of like, which is better? Oh, Epic's better. Oh no, the Odyssey movie is better. Oh no, the Epic's better. Like at that point, I'm just the guy in the middle who really just did not give a shit. And I'm like, I enjoyed both, because Epic's the Musical, its story is still faithful, much as how Nolan's Odyssey's movie is also faithful to like the story. Because ultimately, again, the main core of the Odyssey is really kind of like the redemption story and the portrayal of a man who goes through severe challenges in his journey to become a much better person. And both Epic and the Odyssey movie embodies that really, really well.
Adaptations are not meant to be judged solely by how faithful they are to the original. If you expect an adaptation to reproduce every single detail of its source material perfectly, you're setting a standard that no adaptation could ever meet.
All right, so that's like my emotional rant toned down now. I'll be a little bit more informative on this one. And that is like, kind of like the comparisons between like the Odysseus character of Nolan's movie and Jorge's Odysseus' character. In comparison, in my personal opinion, the most faithful is Nolan's Odysseus' character, because of just how grueling it feels, and just how sort of like how dreadful it feels. And you can really much see that in Matt Damon's face when he is acting out the scenes. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when it comes to Jorge's Epics the Musical, Odysseus in that story seems a little bit too strong because, like I said, it's like an anime protagonist who simply is like trudging over like, those, obstacles and then going to the next and then into the next and then finally, going back to Ithaca. To me, that is like a little bit too strong. But the whole point about Odysseus's journey, or if you're an academic or a classicist who studies the Homeric works or Homeric poems, you would use the term nostros.
Nostos. Nostos is more than simply returning home. It is the journey back to oneself.
This is where the portrayal of Odysseus is vastly different. To which, to me personally, from my personal knowledge and from my own personal opinion, Nolan's Odysseus, in terms of capturing nostros, is possibly the much better one in comparison to Jorge's Epics the Musical. And again, I'm a person who enjoys both of these both of these things. Okay, I enjoyed the movie and I enjoyed Epics the Musical. So if you're gonna come at my throat because I said like one's better than the other or just something else entirely, that's gonna be your fault. And hey, here's the thing: I have my opinions. All right, so don't kill me. Also, me saying like the Epics' version of Odysseus is like an anime protagonist. Why don't we adapt the Odyssey into an anime? I'm just saying, like that can go hard. Whoever's out there, come on, Japan. Whoever is aspiring mangaka or an aspiring anime artist, make a fucking Odyssey anime. It can go. I can guarantee you that is like. They can go hard. It can go hard. I'm just saying. So with finally all of that being said, the main thing that we can take away is that every adaptation and every interpretation and every reiteration of the Odyssey are valid, so long as they are faithful to the main core elements of the story. And that is becoming a better person by facing through adversaries and by going through a tough journey where you lose, where you learn, and where you become better. And when you finally return to a place where you feel loved and where you feel like it is your home, you feel like a much better man personally and morally. And that really goes to all of these adaptations, not just like, Nolan's Odyssey movie and Jorge's Epics the Musical. So, and I should also point out, when it comes to people like, oh, it's not like faithful to like the original Odyssey, like, guys, the original Odyssey kind of like, really does not, it kind of really just doesn't exist because Homer has been sort of like, taking creative liberties and embellishing like the sort of real life events with like all of like these fantastical mythological and like godly beings that are the gods of Olympus and all of that stuff, but it's really just their culture and like their way of understanding the history of a bygone era for those times, which is like a specific point in ancient Greek history. And again, when it comes to movies, and this also goes for musicals as well, they are all entertainment. They're not documentaries. I said that before in like the beginning. So if you guys want to like, have 100% accuracy, just go watch a documentary. And if you guys like, you want like, the original, we want the original Odyssey, go read the epic. Just go read the actual epic. Go ahead and read whatever translation that you guys have on hand. That also goes for Emily Wilson's translation, because that's really the translation that's easier for everyone to read, because Emily Wilson's objective translating that Homeric poem of the Odyssey is to make it accessible for modern audiences. And that also goes for Nolan when it comes to like adapting the story of the Odyssey. making it accessible to everyone, making it easier for everyone to understand the core elements of the story and the Odyssey. And, hopefully it also gets people to actually read the epic or like the mythological epic itself, And that's what I did. I legit just went back to like the translation that I have on hand and just, I read it again, like bits and pieces of it. And that's really, I feel like the bigger like picture that I feel like a lot of us are not really getting. Like all of these adaptations are giving us a moment of Homer, if that's even like a term that I should use. But basically Homer's having a moment, all right? And he's having a good moment. Although I should clarify, like, there are academics and scholars who are even debating like if Homer was a real guy, or like just a collection of like other people who are bards, who are referred to as the sons of Homer. But that's like a whole nother thing. I don't have like the time and like the brain capacity to do that, because oh boy, this whole entire discourse really just boggled and fucked up my mind so much that I just had to make like this video. Like literally, this is like the whole thing about me making this video, because I'm like, guys, come on, let's just enjoy everything. Both adaptations are like not really accurate, but even Homer wasn't accurate because Homer was a poet. He was not a historian, he was a poet. Like, we can't compare Homer to Herodotus, even though Herodotus also embezzled a lot of things and he also wasn't really accurate when it comes to like history. But yeah, that's again a whole nother thing.
We know so little about Mycenaean Greece because at some point that society did fall apart. Theories for this Bronze Age collapse abound. Sea peoples, massive migrations, climate change, wave of volcanic eruptions, but nobody really knows. The upshot, though, was that society did crumble, literacy did evaporate, and complex kingdoms gave way to small-scale, even tribal societies.
So yeah, if you guys like want like, I don't know, the fucking original Odyssey, read like the original like Greek translation of it, or discuss it with like actual translators who have read the thing. Or better yet, if you guys can, build a fucking time machine. Then come talk. So with all that being said, I really do hope that, for one, people can just chill the fuck out and just, everyone just calm down and let's just enjoy all of these adaptations for what you will. All right. No point with like this whole discourse of like what's more accurate than not, because historically, even Homer's not even accurate with like history itself, because again, he's a poet, not a historian. So you might as well critique all of these adaptations in a poetic and a more, creative standpoint, because there's no point of like, treating your criticism like a historian when clearly the source material is more artistic than historic. I say when it comes to like, the films is objective in making it more accessible and making it more relatable with its broad strokes of spreading its wider message, or spreading the much wider message of Nolan, that also links very well with the main core element of Odysseus' story and the story of the Odyssey. I say like he did a pretty good fucking job. Overall, the film itself is like, it's like an 8.5 out of 10. Like, I don't think it's one of his best films, but it's really fucking good. And if there's one thing, besides all of the other stuff that I've said all throughout this video, if there's one thing that I've learned, whenever Christopher Nolan makes a horror film, I can guarantee you, when we sit our asses on those chairs, we are going to be shitting on those chairs, because holy god, the scene with the Cyclops and the scene with Cersei, very good. So yeah, I think that's all for like this video. So please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel down below, and leave a comment as well, and share this with your friends, because why not? And I don't know, maybe they can also contribute to like this still ongoing discourse, and hopefully they'll stop it soon. Anyways, yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. I actually kind of plan to maybe make a lot more videos about like the movie, and maybe, I don't know, maybe make a review about Epic the Musical as well, like my own review about it. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.